finalize your calls.
We're done. We're just waiting.
Oh, you managed. You didn't go to Kempton Park.
I almost went to Kempton Park. Thank goodness.
This is really
You're just waiting.
Oh, good. The what? No, I'm just waiting for Minister to come here. We're about to go. You're live. What is it?
They've got a slot for you.
All right.
If we override that slot,
Let me take.
about millions.
Let me call it. You've got the time now, no? Please. You know why? Because some Netflix citizens. Oh, there she is. Minister? Oh, is it? Please, if you can, because they are taking us live. Okay, no, that's fine. Richard?
Thank you very much.
Who's going to take the online question?
Online question. Then ask because that is the one.
Colleagues, you are starting. There is the powers that be.
Afternoon to everybody. Sorry to keep you waiting. So listen to you.
Thank you, Minister. Let's get the show on the road, colleagues. Joined by the Minister of Transport, Mr. Barbara Creecy, as well as the chairperson of the ATNS, Advocate Solamachan. Don't have to introduce him, you know him very well. So we'll take the statement from the Minister, and thereafter we'll take questions. I'm Colin Msiwi for today. So, Minister, over to you.
Thank you very much, and greetings to everybody. I think that what you all know is that in December last year, I appointed an intervention team to look into critical difficulties at the air traffic navigation services. And in January this year, we received a draft report from the intervention team that indicated to us 4 areas of problems. The first related to the question of critical staff shortages, both in terms of those who would be responsible for navigation, as well as those who would be responsible for designing flight procedures and developing charts for those flight procedures, but also critical shortages in terms of instructors in our academy. And overall, the view of the team was that the pipeline of scarce skills had not been kept up, and as a result, we were facing shortages of critical staff. The second area that the team highlighted was the question of communication equipment, both current equipment that has been supplied by OEMs that was in need of urgent repair, and of course the question of future investment in capital infrastructure in terms of communication equipment and radar systems. The third area, and that is the area on which we will give a little bit more attention today, is the question of flight procedures. And I think that what many of you would know is that an audit that took place 2 years ago indicated that all of the flight procedures in our country were out of date, and it was necessary for these flight procedures to be revised on a 5-yearly basis, and this had not happened. And consequently, there was an AMOC, which is a special dispensation given by the Civil Aviation Authority with regard to those flight procedures, and that AMOC expires on the 10th of April this year. And then the last area was the systematic weaknesses in the safety management system, and the fact that recurring findings in audits and inspections had not been addressed in a timeous manner. Now, let me just give you quickly an update on where we are with regard to all 4 work streams, and I'm going to request that we will deal with the question of flight procedures last, so that I can give you a little bit more detail in that regard. So we have advertised for air traffic controllers, flight procedure specialists, air traffic instructors, and all other categories of skilled staff. And what we can share with you is so far we have appointed 2 former ATNS officials that would be dealing with air traffic navigation, and they are currently undergoing validation. And this week we are making offers to 13 other personnel. 4 will be in approach radar, 4 in approach, 5 in radar, 2 in approach procedures. And all of these people will obviously have to serve their notice in their current jobs, and then they will have to undertake the assessment in July, and they will go through validation, and we expect that they will become operational by November. So we are quite excited that we have been able to identify these 13 persons. But I think we did indicate previously that because of the complex validation procedures that we have to go through, they won't be operational immediately. Currently, we do want to recruit 10 instructors. We've interviewed 4 candidates so far, and we haven't managed to find anybody suitable. But there is an international headhunting process which is underway. With regard to the critical communication systems, in terms of computer hardware, arrivals managers, and air traffic flow management systems, we have been in touch with the OEMs, and the OEMs have indicated that by mid-April they would be in a position to respond to bids and to begin to address issues in this regard. With regard to ground-to-air radio communications, 10 priority services are in the process of being implemented by the 31st of March this year. And then there is also the issue of direct speech services between air traffic centers and third parties, and we are busy working on this with the OEMs, and this work is dependent on the deployment of new data links and radios along the southern and the eastern Cape Coast, which is receiving attention. And ATNS will shortly be reviewing their CAPEX implementation plan. In fact, it's ready for review, and it will then be implemented in the new financial year. And then let me, before I get onto the flight procedures, let me just deal with the question of safety management systems. This has been an important area where I can report that there's good progress. The safety executive role has been reevaluated, and it's now at the same level as other executives. And this is very important because you must separate your safety function from your operations function, and we've managed to achieve that. We've also managed to close all the CAA findings, internal ATS safety findings and internal technical service findings. We've managed to close out on all of that. And safety investigation reports and recommendations have been implemented. The Safety Action Group has been established, and it's meeting weekly, and that will proactively manage future findings and recommendations. The Safety Review Board has been established, and it will meet quarterly and provide governance on management of overall safety performance, and the first meeting will take place in April. And the high-risk findings have been, there is a process to implement remedial measures on all the high-risk findings, and that was concluded by the end of February, and medium-risk ones will be attended to by the end of March. Now, let me speak about the flight procedures, and I think that it's important to say that of the 300 or so procedures that we have, there are 66 which were due to expire on the 10th of April. And what we have done is that we have now separated those procedures into two categories. The first category is procedures that relate to the large airports, and that would be OR Tambo, Cape Town, King Shaka, David Stuurman, King Paulo, and Lanseria, as well as George. So that is the first category, and there are 35 flight procedures that are covered in that category, and we don't think that these will all be ready by the 8th of April. And so we are submitting to the Civil Aviation Authority an application to give a limited extension on the alternative means of compliance for these 35 priority procedures. And the intention of doing that is to ensure that we can continue to use instrument procedures that are currently being flown for these airports. And then what we would need to do is that with regard to the other airports, which is Polokwane, Richards Bay, Uppington, Mangaung or Bloemfontein, Umtata, and Kruger, we would then need to apply for a longer-term alternative means of compliance so that we can ensure that we submit these flight procedures by later in April and in May. Obviously, the meeting with the Civil Aviation Authority takes place tomorrow. We have a full chart which we have developed for them with every one of these procedures laid out where it is, when we expect to be able to submit the relevant information. And of course, I don't want to speculate on the decision that the regulator would make, because obviously that is an independent body. But our priority is to make sure that the major network airports are able to function, even if we land up with a plan B on the smaller airports while we are busy submitting these flight procedures to the public. Let me say to you that the acting Chief Executive Officer is fully on board with these plans. To support him in the important work that he has to do, the 4 work streams continue. And what we've agreed with the board is that as a temporary measure, we will also base the intervention team full-time in ATNS, starting from, in fact, it began last week. And the idea is that we should be prioritizing this work and making sure that there won't be further delays. Allow me to pause here and give an opportunity for questions.
Okay. Thank you, Minister. We'll take questions. I suppose there will be online questions as well, Minister. You can just introduce yourself.
Take 2 or 3 at a time.
Represent.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Priscilla Lewis from SABC Television News. Minister, perhaps an update on the suspension of the Chief Executive Officer. Where is that? How far is that investigation into the allegations against the CEO? And also, all of this is a bit technical, but I think South Africans would want to know what impact would this have on flights. In December we had a bit of challenges, thanks to my colleague Sola, who told me that a bit earlier. We had a bit of challenges in terms of flights. I want to know, as a South African, are we going to be able to travel well, safe, and on time? What does all of this mean about King Shaka and other big airports being prioritized, and Mthatha and everyone else that's taking a bit longer? What does all of that mean in less technical terms?
Heidi?
It's Heidi Jacques from ENCA. Minister, I just want to get your sense, maybe we can also get a sense from the advocates in terms of how this wasn't picked up. So it's literally been left to crisis stage, where you now have a situation where you have to go to the Civil Aviation Authority and ask for a limited extension, which might not even be granted. But this could have, do you think this could have been prevented? Who dropped the ball in picking up these challenges? And then also, isn't it a bit of a concern that the 13, I think you said 13 additional people that will be added on will only start being operational from November? Isn't that too long of a wait? Is there no other option to try and get people on sooner? And then maybe just on the point of what Priscilla asked, what does this mean for flights beyond the 8th of April should you not get your extension from the Aviation Authority?
Thank you. Another question? Okay, Minister.
So I think let's start with the question of what does it mean to the passenger. And really the whole purpose of having flight procedures is so that planes are able to fly on instruments during bad weather. So if we land up in the worst case scenario where we don't have any extension, planes will be able to fly, but they will not be able to fly on instruments in bad weather. And I think what we all understand is that while pilots are extremely skilled and go through, is it hundreds or thousands of hours of training? Thousands of hours of training. The whole reason that technology has developed is so that we can enhance air safety. And I think that at all times, the Civil Aviation Authority, ATNS, and myself as the minister responsible for transport want to prioritize safety. I think that is the most important issue. None of us like to be delayed. None of us like to be late. I'm a person who often has to catch 3 or 4 aircraft a week, and I don't like being late. But I'm also aware that the most important issue is safety. So we are working to ensure that we will be able to continue to fly on instruments to the big airports. If we land up with a situation, worst case scenario, it may mean that in bad weather, flights will be delayed to smaller airports. Nobody wants that, and nobody wants that inconvenience, but I'm sure we are all agreed that safety is the most important priority. Heidi, we have been working on these procedures. I think I was 2 weeks old in the job when Advocate Majavu phoned me on a Sunday morning and started explaining to me about flight procedures. And we have worked together with the ATNS management team. We've had a meeting every 2 weeks since July. I think the complexity that we have found is that the way in which the submissions to the Civil Aviation Authority have been done have been what I can call a tick box exercise. So we were told that these flight procedures have been submitted. But a flight procedure is not considered submitted by the Civil Aviation Authority until the charts are submitted. And just on these 61 that I'm talking about, there are 177 charts that have to be concluded. They're not all outstanding. But the two of us have done cross-checking, but unfortunately what we found is that the information that we were receiving from ATNS was not accurate. And I think that would relate to issues that would now be under investigation. So I've asked the board to appoint an investigation, and I think that process, I'm told that process is in motion.
The 13th by November.
Oh, yes. Look, what we have done is we've gone back to find people who have left ATNS, who are working elsewhere in the world, who are highly skilled, because the positions that we want to fill are not junior positions. So when you re-establish the pipeline, you will be bringing junior people into the system. And that is obviously important because South Africans in the air traffic navigation space and in the flight procedure space are highly sought after by the aviation sector across the world. Now, when they come back, they have to sit an exam. First of all, they because they are very senior, they have to give notice with their current employers. Secondly, when they come back, they have to sit an exam. And then there is the validation period. The validation period is, we can call it on-the-job training. So the warm bodies will be working in the system from August, but they will not be operating independently. We would love to do it quicker, and I think that we have looked at every which way, but you would understand that the personnel that, for example, are in the control tower at OR Tambo, you don't find people like that strolling around on the street. And when you bring them back, even if they have been working in very sophisticated environments in other areas, they've got to come back and be valid on these very flight procedures that are hampering the situation, because you would want to know that they are working on the correct procedures for the correct airport with the correct aircraft.
Can I just,
Yes, please add.
just as a follow-up, the irony is some of these people are actually our own. We trained them as a country. We lost them to Qatar during the World Cup. I lost 16 in December to the UAE. And now having to get them back, you pay premium. And then when they come back, in terms of the established regulations, you don't just put them on a seat. They have to undergo a validation period with prescribed timelines. And those timelines are not very flexible. So that's why they are only seat ready in November, even though we had contracted them much earlier. The same goes for the flight procedure designers. They go through the same validation process. For air traffic controllers to be fit enough to sit in a tower like OR Tambo, you need your very, very senior people. And those are the people that get poached by the Australians, by the UAE, and everybody else. The Americans are now also trying to steal from us. We have to now go back and get everyone back. So it's not a simple process. It's not as if we just woke up 2 months ago. The minister was luckier in that she got baptized in fire in August or so. We had been dealing with this prior to that, and it is unfortunate that we ended up in a situation where we are competing for scarce resources. So I just wanted to set the record straight. Was the ball dropped? Of course the ball was dropped much earlier than our term, but we accept that we step into those shoes, but efforts had been in place. Just to give you an idea, we contracted a company on the 26th of September last year, went through all the processes, and when we brought them into the country, they failed the validation by the civil aviation. So we couldn't risk using their expertise only for the work that they produced to be rejected. Then we had to start the process again. And we are also vying for the same resources with the regulator as well. You know, because these types of skills are very scarce resources all over the world. We can't compete with oil money, and this is why we're doing the best that we can under the circumstances. On the part of the impact, I think the minister answered it well. It does not mean that you can't fly. I happen to be a pilot myself, so I have a little bit of understanding. It's all about using technology to ease the pressure on pilots and to ensure safety. But absent the procedures, you can still be able to fly in safely, but it's a bit risky. It's a bit complicated, yeah. And that's the honest truth.
Yes, I
One
would
more
think.
question.
As a follow-up.
Yeah. Sorry, I just saw here in my notes that so you've obviously lost a lot of people, like you just mentioned. Could you tell me what the shortage is? Like how many you currently have and how many you need?
We'll give you that information in writing.
Okay.
We haven't got it here at the moment. But I think what Advocate Majabu has indicated is that these resources are in international demand. So you would understand that big airports across the world are eager to have South African skilled personnel because we have a good airline safety record in our country, and our staff are considered to be excellently trained. And as Advocate Majabu says, we can't pay as a developing country what some of the developed countries would be able to pay. And that's why re-establishing the pipeline is very important. This is not the first time that we faced this situation. There was a time during the late 90s, early 2000s, where there was a lot of personnel that were that went to greener pastures. And at that point, a very strong pipeline was established, and that